thank him for all his work. Thank you very much. There are many attributes that I inherited which I admire. One that wasn't passed on to me was Merv's aversion to public speaking, which is why you see me here tonight. Could Merv and Ruth Ann please stand up for a moment to be recognized? The founding of the Manchester chapter of the NAACP. A personal statement by Mervin Weston. Thanks for the opportunity to address you regarding the founding of the NAACP Manchester. I am Lon Weston, the oldest son of Merv Weston, who was instrumental in starting your local chapter in 1963. My father asked me to present this background on his behalf. Since many of the events took place nearly a half a century ago, and he had no reference material available, this account may not be perfect. So please forgive him for any omissions or inaccuracies. I am presenting this history of the chapter based on his personal experience and in his own words, as if Merv was standing up here in front of you now, talking about himself. I was brought up in Boston, went to college, and then served in the Army Air Force during World War II. I came to Manchester in 1949 to start my own advertising and public relations firm. As a new resident, I decided one day to take a trip to the celebrated White Mountains, which I had heard so much about. To my shock, I came across two high-class hotels that had signs at their entrance which read, and I quote, "No Jews or dogs allowed." There were no signs that excluded Negroes because such notices were unnecessary. At that time, no Negro would ever attempt to register in a fancy White Mountain hotel. But discrimination in those days did not only happen in resort hotels. The Manchester Country Club and other golf clubs did not allow a Jew or a Negro to become members. Most private social clubs in Manchester and Nashua excluded Negroes. Although a majority of Franco-Americans were also discriminated against, it wasn't as bad as what was happening in the South. But prejudice in New Hampshire was a prevailing attitude of the times. In the 1960s, there were only about 2,000 African Americans in New Hampshire, mostly living in the Portsmouth area. They were Air Force families who were stationed at Pease Air Force Base and decided to remain in the area. Manchester at that time, if I recall correctly, only had about 25 African American families. One of these African Americans was a bright young man named George Franklin. In 1963, he was walking down Elm Street, carrying a bag of groceries on his way home to his wife, Brenda. For no reason whatsoever, except that he was a black man. he was stopped by a policeman and taken to the police station. There, George was interrogated and then released by Police Chief McGranahan, who was sympathetic to the rights of innocent ethnic people. I knew George Franklin as a casual friend, and he told me about his arrest. But there was something else more critical happening here at the same time. The leading newspaper in the state, the Manchester Union Leader, started publishing front-page editorials, which claimed that Negroes were an inferior race and should be held to their status as second-class citizens. The mastermind behind this diatribe was the paper's publisher, William Lowe. His editorials became more frequent and vitriolic as the Civil Rights Bill was being debated in Congress. Lowe went as far as stating that President Lincoln was a firm believer in slavery. One of Lowe's front page editorials read, "Keep the White Mountains white." George Franklin and I met and grappled with the problem. How do we combat this lunatic fringe? We decided the best way was to organize and try to start a local chapter of the NAACP. We contacted National, and they gave us their blessings. It was in 1964, in the heat of the Civil Rights Movement. We worked hard on this project for months. In addition to the 60 hours a week I spent in my business, I took another 30 to 40 hours a week organizing a chapter. The time was right. We got together a board of directors and held weekly meetings at my agency. George Franklin became the chapter's first president. Hundreds of mailers were sent out to potential members, asking them to join the chapter. As a result, the Manchester chapter quickly grew to 500 members. 95% of whom were white. 5 of us became life members. And we were told by National that we were by far the whitest chapter in the Who were these people that made up the chapter? They were teachers, businessmen, professionals, liberal Democrats, housewives, and religious leaders. While many ministers and both rabbis in the city supported the movement, the Catholic Church remained silent. Only one maverick priest, Father Phil Kenny, got involved. He marched in Selma and defied the neutrality of the Catholic Church. However, St. Anselm's Catholic College in Goffstown did get involved. 3 of its professors, John Winhausen, Bill Farrell, and Vince Koposki, became very active and helped recruit college students to the movement. Our board of directors decided to have a big rally, and we got permission to hold it at the auditorium at St. Anselm's. I was elected to get a speaker. I called Roy Wilkins, the national president of the NAACP. on the phone, he asked, isn't Manchester the town where Bill Lowe runs his paper? When I answered yes, he said, I will come. Roy Wilkins was my overnight house guest. The rally was a huge success. An overflowing crowd of 1,500 came to the auditorium at St. A's to hear him. Wilkins spoke with passion about the civil rights movement and then attacked William Lowe relentlessly to a cheering crowd. The movement continued in Manchester, and more African Americans became involved. Some of the names that I can remember were Frank and Inez Bishop, Bruce Bynum, George House, and of course, Lionel Johnson. In Manchester, we had a very eminent white lawyer on our side. His name was Win Wadley, and the chapter grew in prestige and acceptance when he was elected president. My relationship with William Lowe was a mixed bag. As owner of the largest advertising agency in the state, I had to do business with the union leader, the largest newspaper in the state. However, that didn't stop Lowe from attacking Win Wadley and me in front page editorials. Win and I decided we should meet with Lowe, and we did so in his office on 2 occasions. They were polite meetings, but a total waste of time. In fact, Lowe went the other way and became president of a national right-wing organization based in the South, whose objective was to fight the civil rights movement. I recall one troubling event in Manchester during the height of activity. There was a huge fire in a tenement apartment house where some of the black families lived. The NAACP worked hard to find new living quarters for those who lost their homes. While details have slipped my mind, the question of whether it was a hateful act of arson was never resolved. When the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, we began to see changes. The New Hampshire State Legislature voted to establish a New Hampshire Commission on Human Rights, and I became one of the commissioners. But change did not come that easily. Lionel Johnson and I planned a strategy. We would walk into a local club and ask to be served. When the club owner said he didn't serve colored people, I would flash my commissioner's credential and told him he could be prosecuted. We were served. Barriers also started breaking down in other restricted clubs and hotels. The Manchester Country Club, once a bastion of anti-Semitism and Franco-American prejudice, began accepting all ethnic groups. Prestigious hotels like Wentworth by the Sea were forced to open its doors to people of all religions and colors. The signs up in the White Mountains, which read, "No Jews and no dogs allowed," were taken down. You may still see a sign at a hotel that says, "No dogs allowed," but that is a problem for the Humane Society. fighting discrimination, I backed off. In the early 90s, Father Kenny and I were honored by being presented with the state's Martin Luther King Award. The chapter was now in the hands of the Black community. I cannot say enough kind words about Lionel Johnson, who devoted his life to the cause. Membership in the chapter diminished, but as president, he kept the Manchester NAACP alive. He also funded the successful Black Scholarship Fund to help minority students and almost single-handedly push our Martin Luther King Day through a stubborn state legislature. After some difficult years, I'm happy to see the Manchester chapter is being revived. As a life member and long retired, I can only say that I wish you the best. This concludes the history of the NAACP chapter that Merv wrote for me to tell you. One of my personal all-time favorite songs is sung by Chrissy Hines and called Spiritual High, Spirit of Independence. It is a gospel-style song with an excerpt from Dr. Martin Luther King reciting his I Have a Dream speech. Whenever I hear Dr. King talking about letting freedom ring from the hilltops of New Hampshire, I think of this history of the NAACP. The most influential experience that I have lived through, including my service in the Vietnam War, is this civil rights movement. There is barely a day that goes by in my life that I don't think of Merv's fight to let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops in New Hampshire. Thank you, Merv, and God bless you all. Jeff Weston is also here, and I'd like to for him to come up and accept this award for our pride. Let's go over here.
This far to lead me.